If you are trying to lose body fat and go from looking something like this to something like this, is it better to skip a little bit of protein and create a bigger caloric deficit, or can that create a problem through muscle loss? What's going on? This is Paul Rebella from ProPhysique.com. In today's video, I got a great question that comes from our transformation challenge. So I'm going to start answering questions. We've got a few thousand people in our private Facebook group, and we're still open. If you're looking to register for the 90-day challenge, you can jump in. I'll put a link below for that. But the question really comes down to, we're trying to help people understand the best approach to take to fat loss based on their specific needs. And this is a great question. It's a question that definitely I've asked myself in the past. And so I'm just going to kind of read it to you so you understand where I'm coming from. So protein versus calories is the title of the question. I think we all know we should be targeting around a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Let me address that shortly. Let's say at the end of the day, you normally have a protein shake or some other protein source, but you're not hungry. Is it better to take the additional calorie deficit for that day and not do the protein and go into below your protein target, or to consume it because that protein is for you to, continue building muscle? It goes on to say, I'm resistance training 5 days a week. Cardio is walking. The specific number, let's say the target is 150 grams a day, but you leave 25 grams, so about 15% off the target, but consuming about 150 calories less. So the question from Dan is basically, at the end of the day, if you're not hungry, should you force that extra protein? So the first thing I want to address is the first part of this question where he says, we all know we should be targeting about a gram of protein per pound of body weight. That is a little bit false, especially if you have a lot of body fat to lose. Instead, what I typically say is you need about a gram of protein per pound of your goal weight, which is going to be quite a bit below your actual weight, especially if you're focusing on fat loss. Now, why is this? Protein, while it has many benefits, the primary purpose of this is to benefit our anabolism, or our ability to add muscle. And by shortchanging yourself your protein, you can, in fact, end up losing lean body mass, having a worse performance, and some other things that we'll talk about in a second here. But the primary thing we want to focus on for this question is it going to negatively impact our ability to keep and build muscle if we skip that protein feeding? In your situation, because you're hitting a gram of protein per pound, absolutely not. We can actually eat below our weight, even below our goal weight, and still get plenty of protein for our needs to build muscle and keep muscle. Protein is overused in the fitness community for some very good reasons, right? There's very little negative associations with over-consuming protein. It helps with satiety, so you might not eat other foods. It also obviously has some real big benefits to adding muscle. The problem can become that, we can get a little bit overly dependent on protein. And remember, ultimately, what determines if we're going to lose body fat is creating a caloric deficit. So if you end up eating more protein and that puts you into a surplus or maintenance, you are going to stop your fat loss for that day. It doesn't matter if it's just protein. There are some other things that we can discuss about protein, but for the purposes of this video, I really want to focus on this idea of how much protein and if you should skip. If it's at the end of the day and you don't feel like eating and you're focused on fat loss, I have no problem skipping that meal from time to time. What you've got to look out for is that usually there is a pendulum swing. For every action, there is an opposite reaction. I've heard this many times from my clients. Coach, I wasn't hungry, so I didn't eat. Later that day or the next day, coach, I was starving all day, I overate, right? So there is a compensatory effect for everything that you do. If you're in a caloric deficit and you usually eat before bed and you don't, even if you're not that hungry, the next day you might notice hunger signals are a little bit higher. You get a little bit snacky. You get a little bit overindulgent with your food choices. And that can be a detrimental effect. If you notice that's the case, go ahead and have that protein. The other thing I do want to worry about here is you mentioned that if you leave about 25 grams of protein, that's about 150 calories less. That is incorrect. Protein is actually 25 grams. It's 4 calories per gram. That would only be about 100 calories. Now, I understand that maybe that protein source has other things. Like, for example, if you eat protein from steak, you're going to get some fat. If you eat protein from eggs, whole eggs, you're going to get a bunch of fat, right? So depending on what your protein source is, maybe that's what you meant by that. But I just wanted to be clear that 25 grams of protein is only about 100 calories, right? And for 100 calories of lean protein, you are going to get some magnificent benefits. You might sleep better, right? Now, just because you're not hungry when you go to bed, you might be starving in the middle of the night. You might interrupt your sleep. Sleep is really good for our metabolism, our digestive system, our recovery. So it's not just as simple as skipping that meal and its impact. I'll also say this. The more body fat you have, yes, the more aggressive you can be with this caloric deficit idea. What I notice, especially when I'm dieting, and if you guys haven't seen me, I go down and get shredded. I get some of these trophies here. I get down to like 5, 6, 7% body fat. And in those phases, I definitely notice there's times where hunger is not a problem for me. Energy is not a problem. As I get closer to that body spot for me, where I start to get hungry is probably around that 9, 10%. That's when I notice I'm pretty consistently hungry. But up to that point, I can drop body fat without suffering too much. Okay. So yeah, if you guys are really focused on fat loss, you're not going to impair your ability to add muscle. If you're keeping your protein at a number that's close to your goal weight, you can be slightly above it. If you're doing that plus resistance training, I really don't feel like you're at risk for muscle loss. For me, it's really about the goal that's right in front of you. The nice thing is once the body fat comes off, you can actually bring your food up. You can actually bring your protein back up. So yeah, I think you guys are making really good, informative questions. And that's why I love this group, this community that we've created on the Facebook page, because it really allows us to understand. Remember, guys, I've been doing this for 30 years for myself. I've been coaching full-time for 11, 12 years now. So sometimes the questions that I've answered hundreds and thousands of times, I don't think about them much anymore, but this is a great question. So should you be getting all of your protein or skipping a little bit of it? I think you can use your intuitive nature here and test things out. Find out what works best for you. You may notice, man, I was able to, skip that last meal, cruise into the next day, and I felt great. Likewise, you might notice the other problem. You might be starving or hungrier the next day and you notice your performance drops. So, think of you, yourself, as your own experiment. Us coaches, people that have PhDs, people that have tons of experience in education, they don't know you like you know you. You are your own experiment in this life, okay? And so you don't have to take everything that everybody says as expertise, because you are the expert of you through your experiences. So take those experiences and learn from them. All right, guys, if you have any questions, go to my Instagram direct message right here. Send me your questions. I love answering. Also, comments below. I try to get in there and answer as many of them as I can. If you guys have any questions, talk to you tomorrow.